Welcome to the arena. My name is Greg Sindelar, and I'm honored to be joined today, actually in beautiful Washington, D.C. It's a little cold as a Texan to be here, but honored to be joined by Congressman Brandon Gill from Texas 26. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, this will be a very pleasant, you are in a lot of combative, sometimes interviews and hearings. This will probably be on the nicer things maybe you'll do today. But the purpose is just learn a little bit about you, what your goals are, and what's happening and what's important to your district. So maybe, you've done a lot already. You're a young guy. You make me feel very old, and I'm only 43. But you've accomplished a lot with DC Inquirer and now serving in Congress. So maybe let's start with what got you into this world, what got you into the conservative movement, and what made you decide to run for Congress?
Yeah, a little bit of background about myself. I grew up on a cattle ranch in West Texas outside of Abilene. So we raised Angus and Brangus beef cows, about 1,000 acres out there. So you grow up, driving tractors and backhoes and working cows and building fence and everything you would expect to do on a 1,000-acre ranch. But growing up, whenever I would do that, whenever you're working all day, you want to have something to kind of entertain you. So I'd listen to talk radio and just grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck all day, every summer at least. And it's just kind of gets ingrained to you. Between listening to Rush Limbaugh every day and learning what hard work really is, which you'd certainly do on a cattle ranch, that's kind of a very fertile breeding ground for conservative ethics. So from a very young age was, I think, pretty conservatively inclined and politically aware and engaged. Never knew I'd be running for office, certainly not now. I met my wife in college. We've been married for about 8 years now, had a career in finance, had a short career in conservative media, and things were going really well, enjoyed it. We've got 2 kids. But whenever a seat opened up in Texas 26, which is where we live, just north of Dallas, wanted to get into the fight. You could see everything the Biden administration was doing to the country, and really kind of thought Trump was going to be coming back for a second term and wanted to be a part of that.
That's awesome. Well, you had amazing foresight. I want to talk a little bit about your roots in rural Texas because I was born in rural Nebraska, but I got Texas as fast as I could. But I think rural Texas is just one of the most special places in all of America. And you think about the values that have made Texas, they're held in our rural communities. But we see a lot of them in population decline as we have issues around healthcare and education, all these other things. What do you think has made rural Texas so special? And I'd love for you to expand a little bit on how it formed you, which you touched on just briefly. And, how do we ensure as a state, and what are you thinking about doing from the congressional level to ensure that way of life continues?
Yeah, what makes, rural anywhere in America special really is the people more than anything. These are our people. The Republican Party, we talk about it a lot, but we are the party of the working class. Yep. And the working class are the farmers and the ranchers and the factory workers in the Midwest and the blue-collar workers across the country. Those are the people that really support our country, the conservative movement, our economy. That's what makes those areas special. And growing up, I grew up in a very small rural town. So I graduated in a high school with 24 people. Very small rural public.
Were you in the top 10%?
No comment. And no, I loved it out there, and it was good. But those are the people who we've got to be looking out for. They're the ones who are going to church every Sunday, who are paying their taxes, who are starting businesses, who are actually adding to the economy and to society, raising God-fearing children who are going to be productive citizens of the United States. So that's what makes those areas so special. Those are our people.
Yeah, I love it. Well, so you went from rural Texas to Dartmouth. Well, as an Aggie, I won't hold that against you. Dartmouth is the A&M of New England, so that's great. But what took you to Dartmouth? And then obviously, probably the best part is you met your wife there. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Yep. So wanted to get the best education I could. I was actually recruited to run track at Dartmouth.
Oh, wow.
So as a track athlete, my freshman year as a pole vaulter, loved it. It was a great education, but more, as you said, more important than anything else. I met my wife there. But Dartmouth's a very liberal college, as you would expect, extraordinarily liberal. And whenever I was there, I led a Christian ministry, which was, as you can imagine, not very popular in a secular Ivy League campus, but was also part of a conservative newspaper called the Dartmouth Review, which is, sort of, I believe it was the first conservative college newspaper in the country. We were kind of the rabble-routers.
It's very iconic, yeah.
On campus, had a blast with it. I mean, that was a core friend group. Whenever you're a small group of sort of renegade conservatives on a very liberal college campus, you get to be pretty close.
It's like you're in a foxhole with these folks.
It really is. It really, and it felt like that a lot of times too. I can tell you that. So we had a lot of fun with it. But you definitely learn how leftists and liberals think whenever you're in an environment like that, and it's amazing because you see. We understood how leftists think because we're inundated by it all the time, especially on a campus like that. But they didn't understand how conservatives think because it was foreign to them. So you learn a lot about politics and how to engage with liberals in an environment like that.
Yeah. And so you met your wife, and now you're serving Congress. What is that like? You have young kids. You're young yourself. How's that adjustment been? Actually serving up here and being up here, which I always tell people one of the best parts about being in DC is leaving.
It's very true. We've enjoyed it. Like I said, I've been married to Danielle for 8 years. We met through the Christian ministry in college. Got married as soon. She's a year younger than I am. Got married as soon as she graduated from Dartmouth. She grew up in the political world. Her dad's a pundit, so she kind of gets what this, what politics is about. That it can be pretty brutal at times. I'll as an example, whenever I was running in my primary, we had 11 people in our primary, and this is in a deep red seat, so the primary is kind of the race. And about a few weeks before Election Day, some outside groups came in and they spent millions of dollars attacking me, just straight negative. Brandon Gill is the worst. He wants to defund the police, open up our borders, all kinds of nonsense.
Things that you are clearly advocating for every day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right. And but it was funny during that time, you're right in the middle of the fight.
Yeah.
And you don't know how things are going to go. You just put your head down and keep pushing. And I remember about a week before the election, we were laying in bed, and I look over at Danielle, and she's watching a video on her phone. And I look over at what it is, and she's watching the attack ads against me just for fun to relax in bed. And then I asked her, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm just analyzing these ads. Which of these hits on you are good and which ones aren't? And I'm like, that's... She just loves it. She loves the fight, loves politics. So she's been really, really engaged. She'll be up here next week. She's loves everything we're doing. So, I will say doing this with kids is the hardest part. Yeah. We have 2 young kids. One's 6 months. One is 2.5 years old, Marigold and Winston. So there are some time constraints.
Yeah.
They're involved whenever we're back in the district. We take them out to events. They love meeting people and everything. But, the travel back and forth is certainly the hardest part.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's amazing. That's an amazing story about your wife. I saw a interview recently with the BYU coach, and he was talking about, people are always looking for mentors everywhere. And I'm sure you have some, and I have some, absolutely. But he's like, don't forget about the mentor that's right next to your side the whole time. And how, right. And I think a spouse, a wife, they ground you. And most of the time you're like, I think you should be the one doing this. You're probably much better suited for this, but I appreciate all the help. Well, getting into your business at hand, we just finished the longest shutdown in history.
Yeah.
You were obviously very vocal during that. What was that like? And what did you learn from that process about the ecosystem and the swamp here in DC?
Yeah, I mean, it was really extraordinary because we knew going into the end of the fiscal year, which was September 30th, that there was a funding deadline. it's the same every single year. That's the end of it. I mean,
wasn't a surprise.
There's no surprise there at all. And I think Republicans, not to relitigate this, but we really went out of our way to come to the table with Democrats to provide a continuing resolution at the time that we thought would be palatable to them. I mean, we could have come to the table on September 30th and said we want a government funding minus 20%. To cut spending. We want to add in border security and all kinds of great conservative policies that we would all agree with. And we didn't do that because we said, let's just keep the government open and we can negotiate all of these other policy ideas later. So we'll just do a clean CR. And you realize, I think a lot of people are sort of cynical about politics, rightfully so. And this was the perfect example. I mean, Democrats, one, rejected our offer, something they voted for 13 times in the past. Two, came up with some bizarro world policy ideas that they wanted to add into their continuing resolution to compete with ours that increases the debt by $1.5 trillion as part of a 7-week continuing resolution that provided health care for illegal aliens, that refunded NPR and PBS, things we were obviously, there's no way we're going to do, that are horrible for the country. And that's what they proposed as an ostensibly serious, piece of legislation. So we said no, and it turned it into a shutdown that Democrats created, and it was a battle the whole time. I mean, we were busy because I was both working in the district that entire time, meeting with constituents, hearing from them, hearing their concerns. I mean, my office was still open. Yeah. We were doing casework. We were helping people with Social Security checks and, government claims and all kinds of stuff that you typically do. So it gave us more time to meet with constituents, help with things that sometimes are harder from a time standpoint. But we were also getting out in the media and making the case that this was a Democrat shutdown. Mm-hmm. We did, in fact, make the responsible decision here to just keep the lights on while we can negotiate other policy provisions. But, it just shows you how cynical this place is, how everything we do is so hyper-politicized. You like to think that, especially on the Democrat side, like, you want to think that your elected representative is looking out for you, but whenever you have one side of the aisle that's shutting the government down over, government funding for illegal aliens, that's clearly not the case.
Yeah, it's not serious work, and it's harmful to a lot of Americans. And I think in the past, the media landscape was such that you could get away with that, right? The media would be totally in the left's pocket on these types of things. I think you've learned this, and you're so well suited for this, that with with what's happening with social media and how wide open it is, and what you did with the DC Inquirer, that it's easier to get information out there. And so, can you talk a little bit about, not just during the shutdown, but some of these other fights, how you push your message out and get around maybe the mainstream message, which is absolutely whatever. Whether it's Chuck Schumer or, Hakeem Jeffries or whoever, it's pushing that narrative, and you can't even break through it, to now there are ways to break through digitally and get directly to the American people.
Yeah, I mean, if the entire mainstream media landscape is saying the same thing, which are just whatever Democrat talking points that are being put out that week, I think most Americans hear it, they get the message, they hear what Democrats are saying at least. But they're also hungry for the other side of things. Yeah. Like, they're hungry to hear what is the Republican response, or what is just the basically state-sponsored media line that's being fed to CNN and MSNBC every day. And a lot of it is, if you're engaging with the liberals, engaging with the left, what we do is very straightforward. You're trying to ask the left, what do you actually believe and why, and explain that to the American people. That's something that we did during the shutdown. It was, why do you want to give health care to illegal aliens? Well, you say that's not what you're trying to do. Well, actually, it's in page 57 of your continuing resolution. I've got the text right here. Why are you trying to do that? And once you ask very, sort of black and white, straightforward questions, it really exposes the left for who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. We do that a lot in committee hearings as well. And we've found it to be really, really effective. And you can kind of cut through all the nonsense and get the left to just be straightforward about what they want. And the reality is most people don't agree with them. Most people don't want health care for illegal aliens or open borders or men and women's sports or violent criminals on their streets. I mean, they're on our side on all these issues. We've just got to make the case and expose the left.
Yeah, that's right. They're so good at telling a story. You have to cut through all of that. Well, last night at AFPI Christmas party here in D.C., I was talking to folks, and I said, as conservatives, we're really bad about celebrating our success, and it's because we're always kind of like myopically focused on like what's ahead, right? Like last night, everyone wanted to talk about just what was happening in Tennessee, right?
Right.
But and that's really important, and I'm curious your thoughts on that. But if you look back to where we were a year ago and where we are now, it seemed like we were like in this pit of despair. And with President Trump and what y'all are doing in Congress, we are like digging ourselves out of this, right? Yeah. And so what are the things that you look at the past year, 2025, what are the things that you're most proud of? Obviously, the One Big Beautiful Bill was incredible, but there's several things that happened. I'm just kind of curious, like what are the things that when you go back to your district, you're like, we probably aren't talking enough about these things?
Yeah, I mean, the number one issue of the past election cycle, I think, was border security. Mm-hmm. And President Trump, as we've talked about a lot, secured the border within a week of getting in office. I mean, it was really, really extraordinary how effective he was and his administration was. So that's from a broad policy standpoint, I think the thing that we should be most proud of. I mean, that is an existential issue for the country. But as part of the Big Beautiful Bill, which you mentioned, we did everything we could to codify those border security measures. So that's providing funding for a border wall, for river barriers, for more ICE agents, for more DHS agents, funding for all of the logistical infrastructure needed for mass deportations. Yeah. I mean, we were able to do that legislatively, and that was very conservative policy that we got passed. And getting that done with a 2-seat majority in the House really took an enormous amount of work. But that's
many times it didn't seem like it was going to happen.
Many, many times. And there's a lot of late nights, in the speaker's office with the leader, and it's but we were able to get it done. Every single line in that bill was negotiated heavily, and getting 220 people on board, 218 on board with a piece of legislation, even if they're all Republicans, is difficult. With such a slim majority. So that's something that I think we need to be continuing to hammer home, that this was a existential crisis. Everybody knew, bringing in 4,000 to 5,000 illegal aliens totally unvetted into the country every single day was catastrophic, and we fixed it. So I think from a broad policy standpoint, immigration is the biggest win we've had. From more of a congressional standpoint, we spent a lot of time on the rescission bill that we did. Yeah. I mean, that's something my office spent a lot of time on. And remember, rescission bills just claw back money that's already been appropriated. Yeah. But we got a bill finally passed that defunded NPR and PBS. And that was, that's something that conservatives have talked about for decades. Yep. And every time we tried to do it, the Dems would roll in Big Bird to Capitol Hill, and they'd tell, like you're saying, they'd tell a great sob story about how, Big Bird is teaching, kids across the country how to read, and if we don't, provide $550 million every year to NPR, we won't have news. So we were finally able to get that across the finish line, and that's something that on the Oversight Doge Committee, which I sit on, I think we played a big role in that, in bringing in NPR and PBS and asking them questions about what they're doing with their tax dollars, how they're stewarding it. I think that really exposed them.
Yeah. It's such a good point, and especially, kind of getting back to how democratized information is now. Do you really need public broadcasting? And, because they tried to do this in Texas with the floods, like, well, how would you ever know about, flood is coming? I was like, well, everyone's got phones and all these other things, like that. No one's turning on the radio the way they were 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I think you're absolutely right on the border. As somebody who lives in Texas, who's been down to the border several times, it has changed almost overnight. Just the way that it changed overnight when Biden became president, it's changed back overnight even better than it was under the first term. And so, and I don't think people realize what a national security threat that was. And I'm glad you touched on that. But and I want to get your thoughts on what are some of the big national security threats that Congress needs to take a little bit more seriously, because in Texas we're looking at Chinese Communist Party owning farmland, maybe critical infrastructure, and all of these other things. What are some of the things on the congressional side that you're like, hey, we need to take this a lot more seriously? Our national security will be at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say two things. One of them is communist China, which you just mentioned. I introduced a land act a few months ago now, which would stop any CCP affiliated entity from buying land in the United States. The idea that we would allow our biggest geopolitical rival, which is China, to purchase farmland or really I believe purchase real estate in the United States is frankly insane. The thing with China is that they are our number one geopolitical threat. They have aggressively building out a technology sector, AI, a manufacturing base that is at this point far surpassing our own.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we've aided in the rise of China by opening up global markets in the 90s and early 2000s to allow our biggest geopolitical rival to thrive. So I think that's something we've got to take, and we are taking very seriously, whether it's in critical infrastructure, cyber espionage, whether it's in just conventional military capability, nuclear weapons. I mean, this is our biggest threat. So that's something that's one area. The other is, also what we were talking about a little bit was just broader mass migration.
Yeah.
You can see how parts of Europe are being completely transformed.
Yep.
The UK, Paris, just cities, traditional European cities, particularly from Islamic immigration, are being totally transformed in ways that are totally incompatible with Western civilization. And we're seeing that in the United States as well. The massive fraud scandal of the Somali immigrant community in Minnesota. You see these epic cities popping up across Texas. This is a real threat to us. Not only Islam, but mass migration broadly.
Yeah, it's if you think about we were talking about the culture of rural Texas, but you think about the culture of like what has been the founding spirit of this country, right? Like a lot of these things undermine all of that, and will absolutely change the fabric of our country and what's really driven the world forward for a couple of centuries. What are some of the things that you think, whether it's in Texas or here federally, that we need to be doing to ensure that we are defending Western civilization and our way of life?
Yeah, well, I think you put it really well, is that we live in the greatest country in the world with, its constitutional freedoms, a free market, a very open society in a classical sense. But all of those freedoms and liberties and privileges of being an American sit on top of a cultural foundation that is very specifically Judeo-Christian, and comes with all of the values and principles that have been built up over 2,000 years of Western civilization, the confluence of Athens and Jerusalem. That's something we have to defend. The reality is that if you take Islam as an example, this is as a political ideology, is utterly incompatible with the West.
Yeah.
A very different sense of freedom of speech, very different sense of freedom of religion, very different sense of the separation of mosque and state. And you can see the result again in Europe. A very different understanding of how we should treat and interact with, how men and women should treat and interact with each other. Very different understanding of how to treat sexual minorities. And this really is an existential threat. Western civilization has spent, 1,600 years ensuring that we did not become more Islamic, and we cannot allow that through mass migration, inviting in an Islamic invasion into our communities. So one thing that we ought to be doing is looking at restricting immigration.
Yeah.
And bringing back what used to be the case in immigration policy in the United States, which was an understanding of cultural compatibility, saying that we should choose who comes into our country, and we should bring in people who we believe benefit us. And the purpose of our immigration system is not to benefit the rest of the world or anybody else. It's to benefit American citizens. Yeah. And part of that is asking and recognizing that not all cultures are morally equal. And not all cultures are equally compatible with our governing system. And that ought to be a core principle of immigration policy.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I always tell people, like, running organizations that, our culture is not for everybody. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's not the right place for you. And I think it's no different, right? Like, if we have certain principles, certain things that we want in our society as Americans, like, well, then we have to go find that.
Right.
And those are the types of people who want to be a part of that. Those are the types of people that we want to bring up, no matter where they come from. But they have to share those same principles and values, 100%.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Texas, and then we'll close a little bit about your district. Texas, obviously, large energy producer. We're leading the way in some healthcare stuff and in a lot of tech stuff with AI and many other things. What are the things that federally you're looking at to ensure that Texas can continue to lead the way, right? Because I think a lot of what's happening is important. We're just talking about the threat with China and other areas in the world. Texas is probably the tip of the spear of ensuring that we win the AI race and we are able to be energy dominant and all these other things. So how can the federal government help Texas out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever you talk to business leaders, few things that they want to hear. They want tax cuts, which we delivered in the big, beautiful bill. But the other thing that you hear a lot is deregulation. That's something that the administration has put at the forefront via executive order. But if you're talking about building out, for instance, energy infrastructure, where we need more drilling, we need permitting reform, we need more refining capacity, which is requires a large capital investment. We need a clear, limited, and durable regulatory framework for that to work, so that businesses can be comfortable that if I invest $1 billion into a new AI data center or into a new oil refinery or capex for a new oil refinery, that I can look 5 to 10 year window and be comfortable that the regulatory environment isn't going to flip upside down, and that I can get my capital back and with a profitable investment. I think that's been sort of a driving principle of a lot of the president's executive orders, and that ought to be something we should be codifying into law as much as we can, given the 60 vote threshold in the Senate. That's something we ought to be codifying into law as quickly as possible from Congress.
Yeah, well, and I think that's almost some of the biggest aspect of getting into a lot of the EOs and a lot of the great things that have happened this year is like, how do we codify a lot of those into law so that God forbid something changes. We're not back where we were just a year ago, honestly.
Yep.
All right, so I want to end with your district. So it's always the most interesting part to me. This is the day tripper part of me. But, if we're in your district, well, one, first describe it. And as someone who grew up in North Texas, I know your district very well. In fact, I think I told you, like, my first foray into this was literally Dick Armey's retirement party. So very familiar with your district. But tell us a little bit about your district, and most importantly, where are some places maybe where we can get some good barbecue or some good food while we're there?
Yeah, so the district is northeast of Dallas, kind of centered in Denton County, but we also have Wise and Cook counties as well, quite a bit of rural area. Beautiful place, great people. I would say suburban generally, with some rural areas in the rural counties. We've got Texas Motor Speedway, which is one of my favorite parts of the district. We live not too far away from it, so that's really exciting. And as you mentioned, lots of good barbecue. If you were in Texas 26, go to Argo and go to 407 Barbecue. Very, very good.
That's a great choice. Yeah.
You know it?
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah. I know that district well. I had many friends who went to UNT.
Okay.
My sister went to UNT, and in fact, I had my prom at Texas Motor Speedway. So
that's great.
All kinds of memories in your district.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Congressman Gill, thank you for joining us. You're such a rising star, and look forward to watching more of you bringing truth to light and really helping shed away the stories and get to what the truth of the matter is. You're so good at that. So thank you for your service to the state of Texas. Thank you for all you're doing. Don't spend too much time in D.C. Get back to your wife and kids. Yeah. Hopefully I'll see you at the airport. Thank all of y'all for joining us on this episode of The Arena, and we'll see you on the next episode.